All right, so I'm just going to do a quick. We've been talking a little bit about this idea of Jupyter notebooks. I realize that like a lot of people, probably have no idea what we're talking about. So this is just a quick overview of what they are and why I think you should really like them. So the idea of a Jupyter notebook basically is these sort of things I'll talk about. But they're sort of if you use things like MATLAB before, what you're typically doing is you're using an interactive development environment, right? So you have a section where you type out your scripts and commands and save them as files. You have an interactor, an interpreter where you'll actually execute the commands you want to. And Python has a couple of things like this as well, things like Sublime Text. Not Sublime Text, Spider. But what notebooks try to do is they try to integrate into one place the commands that you're going to write out, your sort of like scripted type commands, plus allow you to execute them in what they call code cells. And so the idea sort of looks like this. I'll sort of do a quick overview first, and then I'll open up a notebook and we can work through it together. But here's some commands, for example, that I type. I'm just declaring a variable in Python, and I'm printing it out. And when I execute it, this cell actually executes a command for me, right? And I can change this to something I want to. And so conceptually, just as a quick demo here, this is allowing me to save all of my sort of scripted code and execute it all in the same location. And that's just sort of general overview of how these things work. I'll get into a bit more detail about this. But the other thing that's really nice about notebooks is that they're not just for code. They're a place where you can put things like Markdown, HTML, JavaScript, you can embed videos into them. And so the way I think that folks should be thinking about this is they're sort of like lab notebooks of the future. So when you're sort of sharing your analysis or keeping a log for yourself or working through whatever projects you are, this is a way for everything to be in the same place, for you to easily be able to share this with other people, and for people to not necessarily even have to run your code, but you can actually see the output of a bunch of different analyses all in one place. Okay. The other thing that I really like about notebooks that some people may not realize is they're not just for Python. They started out as a project from the IPython team, but they have expanded to something called Jupyter, which allows you to use any, a huge number of different kernels, right? So in this case, I'll show you a couple quick demos. So Python is what I just showed you just a second ago. We can also use R, MATLAB, JavaScript, Julia, Stan, a bunch of different things. These are all links. These slides I'll post up online. You can click through and see all the other languages that Jupyter notebooks support. The really cool thing about the notebooks is not only that you can run the code for different languages, but you can actually have the languages interact with each other. So let's say, and this happens to me quite often, I have a favorite R package that doesn't have a comparable equivalent in Python, right? So for example, the LME4 package for people who do linear mixed modeling. And so I can actually do all of my data structuring code and maybe some pre-processing in my favorite Python tools, but then I can pass all of that now to R and do mixed modeling, which is super, super handy. So this is just an example of a notebook that's just going to run some R code. You'll just set it up to run this extension, and now what I've done is I've just told the notebook, hey, I want to execute R code within this cell. And so that's R code that I've executed. We can do MATLAB as well. So there's a package called, a notebook extension called PyMathBridge, and so this allows you to embed alongside your Python code, MATLAB code. And so this is starting up a connection to MATLAB, so officially launching MATLAB on my computer, and now I can just execute MATLAB code as I wanted to. It's a little hard to see that, sorry, let's zoom out here. Right, so you can just run MATLAB code here. And so there's sort of two ways you can think about this. One is that you can create separate notebooks for different languages. But what I'm sort of trying to show you here is that you can, in one notebook, have a couple of cells that are Python, a couple of cells that are MATLAB, R, and go back and forth between them. Right. So here's an example of having Python and R talk to each other. So I can tell this notebook, okay, I want you to execute this R code, save it as a variable in Python, updated by multiplying 10, and then turn it back into a NumPy array. And so when I execute this code, let's look at what the value of x is. X is an array. Now it's a NumPy array, but it started out as a Python sequence and as an R sequence, right? And so this is really nice because, again, if you've used things like, if you're familiar with tools like Pandas, which is Python's answer to data frames, but you have experience with R data frames, they can very easily So again, I also mentioned that the idea that notebooks make it super easy for you to share your code and analyses and results all in one place with other people. And the way to do that is, well, you have a couple of different options here. One thing that's really nice is that GitHub will automatically render notebooks for you. So every time you commit and save, you can save your not only your package development and stuff to GitHub, but you can actually save your notebook files there. So you have a log of your analysis as it's changed over time, and then you can easily send the link out to other people and they can see it. The other thing is the Jupyter team offers something called NB Viewer, and this is a way for people to publicly, not through GitHub, share the notebooks they want to. So you can actually copy, for example, if you save your notebooks into Dropbox or something like that, you can copy the URL here, and you can, let's see if this works. This is it's a way for you to share, again, publicly with the world a bunch of different notebooks. So they have a nice set of example galleries here. So they, here's like, for example, a Python library called Bokeh, and so what the service they have allows you to do is you have a notebook, you've done some analysis, and now people are sharing this entire analysis. And so, like I said, because this is both code alongside a bunch of other stuff, what they've done here is they've written Markdown, so that's what you're seeing here is rendering into text with nice formatting, but they can also have code alongside that. So let's see if we can find a quick example of that. Let's say. So here's some. So as you can see, what you can do really easily is set up tutorials and instructions for folks. You can also show people how to do different kinds of demos. So you can, again, like I said, put these sort of instructions alongside your code. And this is an example of some plain text. In this case, it's actually Markdown alongside a cell that is a Python code. And you'll notice that the notebook renders with both the output and the code itself. And so this makes it really easy, again, for me to see exactly what someone's done and for me to see the net result of that process. So what I'll just quickly do is open up a notebook from scratch here and just walk you through some stuff. If you were able to follow along with the container, you should be able to see a notebook that you launched using the notebook server, the Jupyter notebook command. If you downloaded the MindTools image from yesterday, you'll have a bunch more Python stuff you can play with, and that also will have the ability to launch a notebook. And so in order to do that, you're going to type that command that we did earlier. So let me just, any questions or anything like that, just go ahead and shout them out.
What command?
Yeah, all right. So let me just back up here for a second. So you ran this from within that container earlier, but the command you're just going to be typing is Jupyter Notebook. And this will automatically launch a notebook server notebook. So you're not going to have any of these folders. This is just to show you what these things are possible. So here's an example of a notebook. Here's an analysis, some analysis, apparently called dumb analysis that I did a long time ago, which has, if you know nothing else, you can at least see the output of a bunch of things I've done. So I think this was some M-trick experiment where I'm sort of just mapping out people's locations. And you can see that the notebook renders with plots in it. It has some figures. You can sort of see the code here. Again, what I've done is showed what I was showing you earlier. Can people see some of this text? It doesn't really matter what these commands are. This is just a quick overview to show you the capabilities. But so I have some plots here, and now I'm saying, okay, I want to analyze my data in R, even though I've been doing everything in Python. So let me sort of issue those commands here, and I'm running just a really simple regression in R. Here's ggplot, which people who use R are familiar with, can also render within notebooks. And the other thing is that the notebooks themselves have a lot of neat extensions. So in this case, I have this sort of table of contents that you can click around and jump to different points. If you just do a quick search on GitHub, there's a bunch of different notebook extensions that make life a little bit easier and fun to play with. So I'll go back quickly and just show you what a brand new notebook looks like. So once you launch the notebook server down here, I have a bunch of different kernels. You'll probably have Python 2 or 3. Don't worry about necessarily following on for right now. Once we get into like the hackathon stuff, I'm totally happy to help you guys out. But let's say I'm just going to open up a Python 2 notebook here. So now this is a notebook that has all my Python stuff in it, and I can start coding or doing whatever I want to, so hopefully this actually works. If I can type, right, so I'm going to just run some NumPy commands, right, and so here's all my analysis. And again, the idea is that like once I've saved this, so let's give this notebook a name. For example, let's just say like test notebook, right? So this notebook is going to always save the output along with the execution of the code commands at the same time. And so, like I said, this is really handy because if I were to share this with somebody or save it or open it up again, both the outputs of everything I've done plus the code is side by side. Yeah.
Use the libraries you have installed in your system.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're using, so this is just going to point to whatever Python is in your path. If you're using Python by default, there's no fancy stuff you have to do beyond that. But again, what I can also do is, let's say that I want to write some markdown. So if I go up here, I can say, let's change the cell type to markdown, right? And so now I can say, this is my intro, right? And you can sort of get the idea where now what I can do is I can type out a long paragraph, or I can explain my analysis from results. There's a sort of vision some people have that you might imagine this becomes the results section of a paper, right? Because you can now describe all the steps you've done in plain text in English, and you can actually have the code that reproduces all of your analyses and the plots all in one place, and you can share that along with, let's say, the full manuscript or something like that.
Did you run that cell?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so when you're typing commands, it's enter to just move within a thing, and then shift enter to execute and move to the next cell. If you ever need help for some of the commands, you can look up here for the keyboard shortcuts. So the menu they give you at the top allows you to do some fun stuff, but probably the most important for now is these keyboard shortcuts. So they talk about command mode versus edit mode. This is basically just this idea that I can move between cells like I am here in my notebook, or I can actually enter a cell and now I'm doing something within it. So to get out of a cell, you're just going to push escape. To get into a cell, you just push enter. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff you can do, but we'll save that for another time. So I wanted to keep this brief, so I don't want to go into way much more, but does that make sense to folks? That's a sort of conceptual introduction. Again, I can create, let's say I create a R notebook here. Now I'm running R as the backend. There's a sort of logo up here. You can see that. In order to get that working, there's a couple other things you have to do. Out of the box, Jupyter works with Python pretty easily, but it's not that difficult to set it up with whatever your favorite other language is. So again, this will be an R notebook. I don't know how to use R anymore, but does that work? All right. Can't go from 10 to 10 by 2. Can't go from 10 to 10. That doesn't matter. This is an R notebook. What'd you say? This is why I don't use R, because I don't remember how to use R. But it's going to render R output too, right? So if people have used like RStudio, they've actually sort of copied the same idea now with these R Markdown notebooks and things like that.
It's basically like this is just the same.
It's the nice thing about these is this is interactive. So I haven't used the R Markdown stuff in a while, but typically you would render them and they're static and everything's out there and sort of fixed. Here you can actually interact with them and share the notebook files. So when you create notebooks, they're saved as these .ipynb files, and then you can literally share these with other people if you wanted to, or let's say, let's do this really quickly. I'm going to put this, I'm going to move this into, let's say, my Dropbox, and don't worry about it. Dropbox. So let's say copy the Dropbox link. I'm going to go to this URL, this NB viewer, paste this in here. And now this is some of the stuff I'd hidden for you before, but here's that sort of notebook I was working on. And so now this is a static version that renders everything, so people can see my code and my analysis and all that stuff. People can also download this file and interact with it themselves. And again, if I would have committed this notebook to GitHub, it'll automatically do this rendering for you. So yeah, it's super easy to share stuff. I think those are most of the things I wanted to cover. There's other details if people have questions about customizing stuff or if anything was confusing, but just in the interest of time, I'll sort of keep it at that. Any questions? Yeah.
Could you show in Jupyter you can mix the markdown and all the others? Could you show how to do it?
Yeah. So for example, here I'm back in my R notebook. Every time you create a new cell, so you could do insert cell above or below, and there's keyboard commands to do this as well. You can change the cell type. So if you go to the cell menu up here, and you drop down, you can turn things into code cells. So by default, it's going to use code. The interpreter is going to be based upon whatever you set it up for. In this case, it's going to be an R code, but you can also change it down to Markdown. And then here, I can now start typing Markdown. You can also change it to HTML. So I think you can sort of, if you know how to code HTML and stuff like that, you can, do that stuff, and it'll render as HTML. So there's some people who get really fancy with stuff. You can embed videos. You can make a whole bunch of interactive web things at the same time. And if you know how to code any JavaScript, you can also make your own notebook widgets. So for example, if you wanted to make parts of your data visualization interactive, you can just go in and edit the JavaScript. So the notebook actually runs JavaScript. That's how it's doing a lot of its rendering. So they're designed to be at least somewhat customizable. And so you can write your own JavaScript plugins to manipulate things.